Hello there, and welcome to our show today, Midlife Crisis, Bomb Drop, and Beyond. I'm going to start with a little background on what we call midlife crisis. We're going to refer to it often as MLC, which stands for midlife crisis. You're going to hear about the midlife crisis spouse, and then you'll also hear about the left behind spouse, known as the LBS. You'll hear words like bomb drop and tunnel, and I'll give you a little background on those too. Midlife crisis is often dismissed as a cliche, but the reality is actually far more serious. During this period of midlife crisis, the individual undergoing that experience, they have a profound psychological and emotional upheaval. It often leads them to make impulsive and self-destructive decisions. Despite the clear signs of instability, MLC individuals are still currently allowed to file for divorce, sell their family homes, make irreversible financial and legal choices, often to the devastation of their long-term spouses and families. I'll tell you a little about bomb drop. The bomb drop that we're going to be talking about in almost every episode is actually the moment when a person, often the spouse, unexpectedly announces that they want a divorce, a major life change, or they suddenly adopt an entirely new personality. There's some symptoms of that, such as going from a loving spouse to all of a sudden committed to being cold, indifferent, cruel. They rewrite history. They can claim they've never been happy despite years of apparent contentment. And I mean, even 20, 30, 40 years being happily married. And then all of a sudden you wake up one morning and they say, you know what, honey, I haven't been happy for 40 years. So you can see where I'm going. It's a little disconcerting to the left behind spouse. And, you feel like the rug's been pulled out from under you. There's horrendous discard you're going to be hearing about because it's just not like a normal breakup. It's pretty different. Many bomb droppers become infatuated with a new partner. This is known as limerence. You'll hear that word every now and then as well. Um, I already mentioned they often file for divorce suddenly. They liquidate assets. Let's see. For the spouse on the receiving end, it often feels like their world has exploded, hence the term bomb drop. Many struggle to reconcile the sudden change as the MLC person appears almost unrecognizable. Some later regret their choices, but by then, the damage is often extensive and irreparable. So thank you for joining us today, because now you're going to hear from people um, from around the world as they tell their story from bomb drop and beyond. Limerence. This is the obsessive, fantasy-driven infatuation with another person, often mistaken for true love during a midlife crisis. The stories and events discussed in this podcast are based on our guest experiences and are intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. They should not be considered legal, medical, or professional advice. Any names, locations, or identifying details have been changed to protect privacy. Any similarities to actual persons, living or dead, or real events are purely coincidental. The views and opinions expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the host or the podcast creators. Listeners should consult with a qualified professional regarding their own circumstances. Hello, dear listeners. Today, I have a really special guest for you. We are going to be speaking with John, who has been married for over 40 years, but John is the one that went through the midlife crisis. He's not a left behind spouse or a forward moving spouse. John is the one that experienced the crisis. In his head, it started in 2017. It's lasted about 8 years. He feels like he's starting to come through this, and you're going to hear from him. He knew really right when it started and also when he started to come out of it. So we are going to be speaking with John. This is a really important guest for us to meet with today, to see the inside look at what it's like from their perspective. And,
Right. My
uh,
midlife crisis started in I believe late 2017, somewhere around there. It was when uh, sh- uh, I had retired a few years before, quote unquote retired. I didn't really retire. I ran a farm. I sold my cows. I had surgery on my neck because I had vertebrae that were in very bad shape. I still kept my farm and I raised corn and hay. So I was still actively involved in a job, just it wasn't as demanding. But I did lose self-focus. I lost purpose a lot in doing that. And I think, I mean, I didn't notice depression. I think I'd been depressed my whole life. I really do. The job I had, it was a job that I was expected to do. I knew I was going to do it when I was 5 years old. So I think after I started and became a farmer, it was, I mean, I looked at it like this. There were a lot of nice things about it, but there were a lot of bad things about it too. So the bad things or the good things outweighed the bad things.
So
Um,
was it your family that had a farm? And so you
Father's farm, and I was the only grandson.
gotcha. Okay.
So that's how that. And I came to my grandfather's farm every summer since I was 5 years old and spent 2 months here. So I think that contributed to it some. I didn't know I was depressed. And when I got out of it, I lost purpose of my life. My wife retired that year, which I didn't agree with the retirement. She was a teacher. She could have worked another year. I felt she should have worked another year, built her retirement a little more. We'd have saved on insurance. There were a lot of issues with it. But I didn't voice my opinion. It's her choice. It's not my choice. So she retired. And then it went along. It was probably, I mean, I did things. I didn't have a great beard. I didn't have a great beard 6 months ago. Yeah, 6 months ago. And I always had people work for me, and they were always like most of them were. I had a full time guy that worked for me, and mid he was in his 30s, and we were like friends. And that was probably a lot of it too. I was more adapt to his age. And but anyways, that I didn't I didn't I had an online emotional affair, and it's
Can you tell us how it started?
it started just as messaging online. As a friendship.
Was it somebody that you actually knew?
No, it wasn't.
Wow, wait, did somebody just message you out of the blue?
I can't remember how it actually started. If I think I messaged her
Mm,
and she messaged back. She lived about an hour away from my house.
mhm.
We we never met till last 6 well, my timeline, because my wife's been separated from me for 4 months, so we met for the first time in August of this year, and it had been going on for like 3.5 years online. Yeah, and that's a lot of the issue with my wife. And it is an addiction. I will tell you, it's an addiction.
Right.
And the person that I was with was a lot younger than me. She was pretty smart in knowing how to control that addiction, if you know what I mean.
Mhm.
There were times where we didn't speak for or message for 2 or 3 months. And of course, it built the anticipation and the addiction. It built an addiction.
Do you know if she was married?
She was not married when I met her. Sh She had a boyfriend. They did have a baby. I mean, when my wife found out, she wanted a paternity test, and we never had physical contact. It was a weird relationship. There was limerence, and that contributes to the addiction.
And let me ask you, did you know, like in 2017, did you even know the word limerence? Did you know that that's a thing?
No, I didn't even know midlife crisis. I didn't
Right, right.
I
So
didn't
this is
even
all new for you.
I'll tell you something. I joined, the support group, the community or the hero spouse community.
Mhm, mhm.
The only reason I joined it is because I was on this marriage site, and I told my story, and a lady said, "There's a test you need to take." And I took the test, and she goes, "How many of those things did you have?" And I said, "Like 80%." And she goes, "You had a midlife crisis." And I said, "What? What are you talking about?" I didn't even know it till it was over.
Right.
And my rationale wasn't right. I mean, I have a business partner. We buy and sell bankrupt properties. I told him about it, and he couldn't believe it. He goes, and huh, there's more to this story. I haven't told the whole thing.
Mhm.
This girl, this summer, her and her boyfriend broke up like in April of last year, and it got more, she got more attached. And there was a house that she had worked for the person cleaning the house. The person had died in the house. The house came up for sale. It came up at a very reasonable price. She knew what I did, and she wanted to buy the house. And her mother actually called me and said, "Well, why don't we buy the house and flip it?" And in the process, she decided she wanted the house. And I ended up owning the house with her. And I ended up owning it because when I wanted to stop, she threatened to my wife's birthday is August. She's threatened to come to the house, my house, and expose us of what was going on.
Wow.
Yeah, and that actually was a good thing because that actually brought me to my senses, if that's a good term to use.
Mhm.
I knew that what I was doing was wrong. I had extreme guilt, extreme. Like me and my wife had started walking a mile every day on our property. We own a lot of property, and I had a hard time doing it with her. I mean,
Aw.
I
Because you felt so guilty?
it was agony,
Yeah.
and I was a little different. A lot of men say, apparently, they say, "I love you, but I'm not in love with you." That wasn't me. I didn't have that mindset. I was in love with my wife the whole time. My thinking was, how could I feel this way about 2 different people?
Uh-huh.
And it was terrible. I mean, it when the guilt started, it was I mean, I knew from what started happening with the house that what I was doing was wrong, that my wife was the best person for me. She was, how could I do this to somebody like that? It was very difficult.
Uh-huh.
And I actually prayed for it to end. And it ended, but not the way I wanted, and not the consequences that I have to deal with.
Wow. So, really, you had that emotional affair for about 3 years with
Yes,
this
3.5.
girl, and you didn't meet her for the first 2 and a half or 3 years, it sounds like,
Yeah,
and during that time, did you feel ever guilty about texting or calling?
not as much. It went through my mind. It went through my mind that what I was doing was wrong. It didn't stop me though. You
Yeah.
know, it wasn't enough guilt to stop me. The house was enough guilt to start the process to stop me. I was still addicted though during that time.
Because that behavior of that woman, the house woman, that's sort of like sort of blackmail kinda thing.
Oh yeah, we're in a lawsuit right now.
Really? Oh my
Oh
god.
yeah.
Um,
I went to the police, and the police said if you hadn't have closed on the house, we'd have arrested her.
uh-huh,
We closed on the house was the problem. I just
um,
I ended up signing a paper in the attorney's office that I
wow.
couldn't sue them. Yeah, that's it's not a good thing. I mean, I tell people my story because hopefully someone can learn from it, but I'm pretty embarrassed. Um,
Well, we'll get to that. I mean,
yeah,
it's like a disease, and you can't it sounds like, you couldn't
it's
really control it.
a disease. It's an addiction.
Yeah.
It's no different than taking drugs.
Yeah, exactly. You know what? When I first, started understanding how MLC works, I equated it to somebody that's like a heroin addict, you know?
It's like it.
Mhm.
Like it.
Wow.
Almost. there's a lot more that I've learned, and I've been on the site and commented some, and everybody wants to know why, and I know why, and they don't wanna know. There's I talked to one guy called me up because I had just gotten on the site and I was telling about it, and I told a little bit about why. And
Mhm.
he called me and he says, "You don't wanna say that on here. You will these women will tear you
Well, can you tell us why? We're not gonna tear you apart, and we don't use names. We
you
don't use
are not gonna wanna hear it." You know marriage is 2 imperfect people
uh-huh,
trying to and they are.
yeah,
And what I did was wrong, and I know that, but there were a lot of reasons why. I have a meeting with my counselor tomorrow. I've been in counseling every week. It's gone to 2 weeks now. I'm in Christian counseling, I'm in regular counseling, and I don't mean with a coach. I mean with a counselor from a hospital. So, they're professional people.
mhm,
And I was very insecure. We Me and my wife have been married 43 years. There is a pending divorce. We have had a hard marriage. She
mhm, mm. Oh,
Yeah, and this was a long time ago.
mhm,
I know that I know that she's very upset about being separated and the way our marriage is ending up, if it
mm,
ends up that way, I know that. She basically said when she left, "You ruined my life," and I feel the same way too. But there's things on both sides that cause it, and
mhm,
really what people need to do when they you can't the problem is, and I've said this to people that have contacted me, I said, "I wish I had a magic phrase that I could whisper in the person's ear that has this and they would come out of it.
yep.
I wish I did." But there isn't,
So
and,
so you started to see yourself going in that direction of being addicted? Like
uh, I didn't really I knew it was. I didn't equate it to an addiction then.
mhm.
What it was, I couldn't control myself. I've made terrible decisions. I
Did
mean,
you wait, what the terrible decisions even outside of the relationship, sort of? Like, just in general in your life?
yeah, well, I couldn't I'm very anal, and I pay a lot of bills. I write my checks. I put a date on the envelope 5 days before they have to be 5 days before they're due,
Mhm,
and they get mailed 5 days before they're due, and then 3 days after that, the money is transferred from my savings account to my checking account, so it draws interest during that whole time.
mhm.
I got so I was forgetting to take the letters out and mail.
Wow. So I hear this a lot that people describe it as a brain fog. Did you feel that way, that you were just a little,
I didn't
you
feel
know
but I knew looking back, I just thought mine is different. I'm 66 years old. This
Mhm,
started in the late '50s, and I'll tell you, I know the day it not the day, but I remember the day very distinctly that it started. I sat in a chair right over there,
mhm,
and all of a sudden, I started thinking about dying,
hmm.
and it was like a panic attack. It felt like time and space was compressing, and it lasted for about an hour, and it would come and go, and I had it for, I don't know, 6 months or a year. And it did leave after a while, but I changed too. I became a midlife crisis person.
Wow. So that's sort of how it started. You started having that feeling of
Oh, yeah,
loss.
it was I have anxiety pretty bad.
Mhm.
I always have, and it was worse than any anxiety that I've ever had. Like I said, it was like a panic attack.
Wow. Did you talk about that with your wife, or did you
Oh, I
talk to
didn't
a
say
doctor?
anything.
Mm,
If
wow.
I could go back, if I could advise somebody, I mean, I don't think anybody that is going through somebody going through that might listen to somebody. and say if they said, "Hey, you're having a problem. You're having a mental problem." It is a mental problem. It's a mental you have a mental deficiency. It's I don't know why it's temporary, but it is a mental deficiency. I don't wanna say it's mental retardation because it isn't like that, but it's it's something your brain isn't right. And
Right.
I know you wanna know why I know it? And this is one of the things also that started more guilt, is I have a knee problem, pretty bad, and a back problem because of what I've done my whole life. And I go to a specialist for it, and they said, "Why don't" there's a reservation near us, and they said, "Why don't you go to the reservation, buy some gummies and see if it helps you?" I took a little piece of that gummy, and it made me terribly paranoid, so
Mm.
I didn't do it anymore, but it also took the midlife crisis away.
Hmm.
I knew what I was doing was terribly wrong. I felt guilty. I felt it was it was like and that was late. It was like a year ago, maybe not even a year ago, 10 months ago. But it affected my brain. So the chemical, whatever chemical is in marijuana, affected the midlife crisis, whatever the midlife crisis was doing to my brain.
Wow. That's amazing. Hmm. Yeah, thank God it's temporary, you know? I had mentioned something to a doctor, and they said that they can do blood test or hormone it might have had something to do with hormones, you know, as people age. So I don't know. I guess they say
That
andropause, that's the male menopause, andropause?
that could be. Yeah,
Yeah.
probably. I'm sure it probably is. I don't, you know, I don't know, but I didn't know I had midlife crisis. I didn't even realize the severity. There could be a severity of
Yeah.
it. I don't think there's enough awareness. People don't, midlife crisis. You go and you get a tattoo like that. You go buy a car. Yeah, actually, I planned on getting that tattoo long before I got my midlife crisis. It just,
Ah, okay.
yeah,
So let's see. Okay, so she was your limerent object, basically, that gal. Do you feel like she may have sought you out kind of thing?
after she found out more about me, I think she did.
Hmm.
I mean, she she was. I'm trying to think how old she was. She was 22 or 23
Oh, wow.
when we first started talking. Well, no, 25, 24. I'm trying to
And she
think.
lives in America.
What? Yeah,
She lives in the
she
United
lives
States.
not far from here.
Wow, that's crazy that somebody's so close by. And did she ever come and how did your wife find out? Like, so obviously she didn't come on the birthday, but
Uh no, my wife's asked to see my phone because we had an issue 2 years ago, and I gave it to her, and she said, "What's this?" And it was actually a phone call from there was a text message, I
Mhm.
believe, the girl's mother on my phone, and I said, "Well, that's something you probably aren't gonna wanna see." And that's how she found out, and I I immediately told her that she called the woman and started talking with her, and after all of the commotion stopped, I went and told my wife that there was a house involved, and apparently she had already been told that. So, but I wanted to be upfront with her from here on.
Yeah. So it sounds like from your wife's perspective, that might have been the bomb drop.
Oh, it was. Yes. Yep.
And what happened after that? And
Funny.
when was this? Did it happen oh, you said it was pretty recent.
October 20th it happened.
Okay. Right before
And
months ago.
yes, 4 months ago,
Wow.
4.5 months ago. And there were 2 days we didn't speak. After that, we spoke. I don't know. I think she was just making plans at the time. We did actually the day before and the day 2 days before, We walked both days, which I was shocked.
Uh-huh.
But I think she was just doing it to put up
Sense
a
of normalcy.
yes, so because she left the next morning, and
When she left, was it sort of immediate or sorta like, "You know what? I'm
oh,
out of here."
it was covert. She never told me.
Oh,
I haven't spoken to her since that morning.
what? So you have not spoken to your wife is almost like what do we call it in MLC? The the spouse that doesn't come back,
Yeah, yeah.
uh,
Sh
like
it
a runaway wife. Yeah, okay.
it
So you
hap
have not so
elect
the holiday
election
season went.
election day was the last day full day we were together. The
Wow.
next morning, we didn't know who had won the election. She woke up, I think the last thing she said to me was, "Trump won the election."
Huh.
And I had a doctor's appointment that morning. And when I came home, oh, there's so much involved. We own a farm. She has horses, very expensive horses. The horses were gone, all very expensive saddles. All the saddles were gone. She has an art studio in her barn that I built, and most of her art stuff was gone. Very little was taken from the house.
Hmm.
Well,
You said you did file for divorce?
she did.
Yeah. Hmm. So this is the longest you guys have ever been separated?
Yes, we were separated one other time for, like, oh, maybe 2 months, and it was the same. I mean, I was at that time, I was in my 40s, I was playing hockey. Oh, I played hockey most all of my life at a very high level, and I played men's league here locally, and a bunch of kids saw me from the college and said, "You need to come to play." And I went and played, and I came home one night and all our furniture in our whole house was empty after a hockey game. Yeah.
Wow.
So that was another time. And we went for Christian marriage counseling at that time. And I mean, a lot of my behavior was different after that.
Mhm.
I did change in different ways. And I'm right now, I've done a lot of I've got notepads here full of ways to modify your behavior, to deal with your emotions, to relate to women, how to be a better husband and a better person. Um, when I do something, I don't do it halfway. And
Mhm.
my idea was I'm going to be a better person out of this.
Good for you. And it sounds like it's do you feel like you're out of the tunnel now of the limerent object thing that's passed? There
Yes. Yes.
you're out. Did you feel like was that a gradual process or
Well, it was abrupt. It was when she,
really?
yeah.
Wait, it was when your wife
Actually, it
left?
was before she left. Yeah. Yeah, I offered to go to counseling. I said, "Can we work on this? I think we should go to counseling." And of course, because our marriage was the way it was, she had been to counseling before.
Mhm. Mhm.
And after you do that, then, I mean, she would do all kinds of things to try to. The last thing she was doing, and she was doing it right up till she left, was trying to show me more respect because that changes the way I react.
So she was trying to do that. She was trying to improve.
Yeah, but she was doing she didn't do any of the emotional stuff for herself to make me more connected to her.
Uh-huh.
You see what I'm and that went through my mind too. Why do I have this connection to this other person, but not to her?
Yeah. Almost a stranger, really,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
God,
Why is this emotional connection with her, but there isn't with my wife?
mhm.
Well, I found all that out in the last 10 days because I have to meet with my counselor tomorrow, and I told you she wanted me to go back in time, and I had a hard time doing that because she said there's always one major thing that a personal she's done prison counseling too, and there's always one major thing that an inmate brings up that their life changes on a dime.
Mhm.
But knowing what I know now, there isn't always one major thing. It can be subtle things. It can be mine was emotional attention was given and withdrawn as a child. It's very
Mm.
I can remember it now. Did it seem like it should affect me? No, but it's subconscious
Wow.
and it imprints you. There's ways to change it.
Oh, really? What kind of ways?
I don't know that yet. I
Oh,
haven't
and so
it
was this from a parent figure?
yeah,
Mm,
I always thought it was from my dad because my dad is a lot like me. He isn't very I mean, my family never hugged, never kissed
mhm.
each other, never. And my
Oh,
father
so emotions were sort of pushed under the rug or more like, "You're a guy, don't cry, just
yeah,
go."
and it can't my mom me and my mom aren't speaking right now because of
Oh.
it. And it's not and I just I can't talk to her. And
I will say though, I think,
tell you why it is. It's because when this first happened, like 2 days after it happened, my mom calls me, and I couldn't believe it because she never calls me, and I always put my phone on speakerphone, and my wife's there, and she goes, "Well, are you gonna tell her?" And I had no intentions of telling her at that time because I didn't know what we were where our lives were going. So
Sure.
why would I and my wife started and she said, "Well, things aren't good."
Mm,
And we told my mother, and it went along a while. And of course, my mother goes, "I'm not taking sides." And, and I talked to my counselor about it, and she said, "Well, what's that tell you when she says that?" And I said, "Well, she's not taking my side. It's taking her side."
how did
And
that make you feel?
well, that I don't want to disrespect my mother, so I'm not talking.
Mm. Were you expecting your mom to take your side?
I would expect she should.
Mhm. Yeah,
My
it's a hard situation, I mean, over 40
There's a
years.
whole bunch of
You
things that are my wife's attachment style is a vindictive attachment style too,
Uh-huh.
and my daughter does not speak to me. I haven't seen my grandson in 4 months.
Oh, dear.
Yep. She's been on the internet and villainized me, and I did put an end to that because when I could comment on it, I put, "Maybe you ought to tell all these people about the adulterous affair."
Hmm.
That stopped, but
I do think, the other generations before us, like your parents, they probably did the best they could at that time that
oh, I
they knew,
agree.
you know?
Everybody. You
Yeah.
mean in raising a child?
Yep.
I
And
agree.
that was just the way it was.
Everybody does. I mean,
Mhm.
my daughter told me that she and I don't know why she's not speaking to me because we did speak at Christmas time, but she told me I was an absentee father, and I was. I mean, I ran a farm. It was a small farm. We had like 40, we were 40 to 50, 40 to 60 cows. We had 120 head. I hired one kid to come after school for an hour a day. I worked 13 to 16 hours a day, 7 days a week,
Wow.
40 years, and I had 3 weeks off the whole time.
Mhm.
So, was I an absentee father? Yes, in a lot of ways. Did her college get paid for? Does she have college loans to pay? No. Did half her house get paid for by her father? Yes. So you know, there were other ways I tried to make up for it.
Mhm.
I kinda did the same thing my mother did to me, I guess.
Yep. And that is typical,
Yeah, yeah,
That's what we do.
yep. So, yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the generations being raised I've got a teaching degree and I've taught school also, and I don't because I don't agree with the way the schools are run, but I do think my generation and probably maybe my daughter's generation are have had the best parenting that they can have. the parenting now is terrible in most cases from what I've seen, but and that shapes a person in a lot of ways. And,
Mhm,
and I don't think I know one thing. Me being an anxious, preoccupied, probably stopped me from leaving my wife. You know what I mean?
mhm.
I had no intentions of ever leaving her. Never, never really. I mean, I was buying stuff for her car right up till there's this brand new set of tires out in my shop. There's snow tires out in my shop on rims. I was still buying stuff with the anticipation that, a month before this all happened, that, she would need. So there was I'm odd, I guess, is all I'm saying. I'm not your
Yeah.
typical MLC that looked at, a progression to leave.
Mhm.
I guess there are some that don't, but
Your wife is lucky in that respect, she
I
may not
don't
real
know. I don't know. Is she? She ended up in the same spot, only in reverse roles. It's
did
odd.
she realize you had a midlife crisis? Did you say that to her? Did you guys talk about it?
No, I didn't know till
Oh, wait, so when did you realize?
after she left.
After.
Yeah. I didn't find I didn't join that marriage support group till after she left, and then that's where the person in it said, "Hey, you need to take this test." And that's when I found out, and I have told her, I've sent her the information to the midlife crisis group. I don't think she knows the extent that it can affect a person, because she did say when we were together 2 weeks, she could say, "I could understand if you had some kind of mental problem and this happened." Little does she know I did.
Yeah, well, that's good she said that,
I don't she
vows
doesn't
are
she
insignificant.
won't she won't read the information. She won't look at it. She won't
She's really hurt. She feels really betrayed.
I think she feels really betrayed. If there was a way I could educate them and give them the knowledge that I have, at least they'd understand.
Mhm. Well, we're trying to do that with this show,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of folks now that are trying to lift the awareness of
There needs
MLC.
to be more awareness, and there needs to be some mental health studies.
Mhm.
I believe there's some way that this can be prevented
Yep.
to the extent. I mean, you're probably not gonna prevent a midlife crisis, but to the extent that people have it, I think there is a way to limit the severity,
Mhm.
but there's not enough knowledge, there's not enough awareness, there's not enough studying, and there's probably not enough money.
Mm. Um,
I
well,
mean, the last we've had one meeting where I've seen her, and it was on like we're doing now. She couldn't look
mhm.
at the camera. She couldn't e
She could be having her own crisis too.
I I wondered that. She had gone through something. She's on hormones, so I don't know. She's got a master's degree.
Mhm.
She got a degree in art education, elementary education, and a minor in psychology, and a minor in abnormal psychology.
Hmm.
She ought to know what's going on, but I don't know what she does. My attorney did bring up, of course, I'm asking for reconciliation, which I live in New York, so we have very liberal laws of all kinds. So
Mhm.
they just about hand divorces out at a drive-through.
Yeah.
Uh, and but my attorney is did talk about reconciliation and brought up, the work that I've done, the midlife crisis, and I forget her attorney. He handled it in a way that was demeaning to me. Let's just enough so that the court
Wait. Your attorney did or hers?
hers
Oh,
enough,
okay.
enough so that the court person said, "Look, we're not going to have any of that going on."
Hmm.
It was my I think my attorney said, "What can we do? Can we do counseling?" And he said, "Well, the problem with it is it's the second time," which I said 2 years ago we had an issue,
Mhm.
and now this. And your attorney your client went out and bought a house with, I forget how he worded it, but it was very demeaning.
Mm. Hmm. Right.
Um,
Hmm. Well,
but
I'm
it
so sorry to hear that it's just unraveled like this, you know?
I am too because, uh, I'm not a quitter, and I think it can be fixed.
Mhm.
It would take a lot of work and a lot of understanding. I've done a lot of the work already.
Right, right. Mhm. So, do you ever sit down and have you don't have those panic attacks anymore about
Nope,
life is short,
nope,
death kinda thing? Good.
I got nothing to live for.
Oh, that's not true. You're you're gonna have a lot to live for. So,
You
uh,
you don't know.
no, I think, a lot of us feel that way at times, really, but, you know
I've talked with my business partner. We've talked about it. Actually, we talked about it quite a while ago. And it was probably a midlife part of my midlife crisis and part of what he's going
Mhm.
through.
Mhm.
And we've talked about it, and this may have helped some. We've done a lot in our lifetime. We've accomplished a lot. We're both He told his aunt about our partnership, and she goes, "Well, partnerships are really bad." And he goes to his aunt, "Well, the guy's just like me." And she goes, "There's another one like you?" And we are. We've got the same demeanor,
Aw.
mm,
How long have you guys been partners?
since 2018. But we've known each other. He was for 30 years. Um,
Um, through your counseling and things, have you realized or, do they talk about, like, joy and that feeling of fulfillment needs to come from within and not from your spouse or anything
we
like that?
haven't talked about that.
Oh,
We've
really?
um, it's kind of weird. I pretty much run the counseling thing. Because first I was, obsessed with why I did what I did
Yeah,
and how can I repair the damage.
yeah.
And we still talk about it some. And then my counselor and now I've said to her, I've had a lot of laws. How can I improve on those? So that's where have started and looking into my childhood. And I mean, I meet with her tomorrow. It was 2 weeks ago and I think I got more figured out
Wow.
now how the why I am the way I am. Now, after that, how do you fix it? How can you work on changing your attachment style?
Yeah. Well, I guess recognition is the first step in the right direction, right?
Well, yeah, I've known yeah, admittance, remorse, acknowledgement, and accountability.
Mhm.
That's how you correct yourself.
Well, I refer to all my male guests as John, so I'm not gonna say your name, but, okay, so you've got a lot coming up in the future. Would it be okay if we have a part 2 sometime in the future?
Sure, whatever you want. I'm
And
open
let
to
me ask
talk
you, any
about
any
this.
any
Okay.
last minute you wanna share with our viewers today? You've got some advice there. You've got a lot.
I talk in the chat, and I try to give them advice. Most very understanding, and I try to tell them pretty much what happened and where I'm headed. Um, I do think, given time, I will tell you right now, your husband will regret what's happened.
Mhm. Yep.
And if you can if you can buy the time and prevent certain things from happening, If you feel that your relationship is worth that, it's a risk, but it's something that I guess if you're in love with someone, it's a risk you have and decide on your own whether you're willing to take or not.
Uh-huh.
It's like me now. I've been 4 months and I went sending my wife, messages, and the last one I sent her was she asked me why this happened, and I never when she asked me, I could not give her a satisfactory answer.
Mm.
All I could say was it made me feel younger,
Right.
but I couldn't tell her all why I did it. I told her in a way, I said I was very insecure both in my life and in my marriage at the time, and those were the main reasons that and I said there were some reasons why I felt insecure. Went to the part with my mom and all that, but
You know,
wanted her to know I would, and I will if she gives me that chance.
to me, when I hear that she said that to you, that she asked you, how did it happen? I think, that's really like her willing to be opened up, sort of keep a wall, maybe an invisible wall between
Yeah,
you all.
that was the 2 here with me.
Yeah.
The fearful avoidant, fluctuates from avoidant to anxious.
Oh.
They go from one extreme to the other, and she must have been in the anxious stage where she wanted to you see what she
Yeah.
wanted to inquire? Um, I think it would anyone that goes through this, I think it would do anyone good to talk about it afterwards, whether you're with your partner or not. I think you owe them that.
Mhm.
Um,
You're very lucky that you've come out of this, you know? Not everybody does.
8 years.
8 years. It's been 8 years?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, 2017
What a
now.
great way to start your retirement, huh?
Oh, I'll never be retired. I'm not that type.
Yeah,
I've got so many things that I do. Um,
but that's a good thing.
yeah, I would do things a lot different.
Mhm.
And I don't know. I li we got 5 foot of snow here this December, and it collapsed one of my barns.
Oh,
Caved the roof right in.
oh.
Yeah, it's I got a huge mess to clean up from that, but, yeah, and I've thought, I don't know if I wanna live here in the winter. Maybe I'll have
Mhm.
a place in the South in the winter South. I don't
Mhm.
know, but, it changed my life.
You mean
Um,
the crisis?
yeah, the midlife crisis has changed,
Wow.
and not for the
Right. I'm so sorry, I mean, it is devastating. See, you're the person in the crisis, devastating for you, devastating for your wife, daughter, grandchildren, the family.
yeah,
It
yeah.
it's hard to for some people, it's really hard to
Some
face.
people won't admit it
Yeah.
outright, but inside they will know what they did was wrong and regret that they did it to
Uh-huh.
someone.
It's really sad because it's tipping, it's happening to people's, the latter third of,
Yeah, yeah. Well, why do you think there's some men look at the rise in divorce. Look at the rise number of divorces with people with gray hair. They're talking about it all the
yeah.
time.
Oh, yeah, there's a Facebook group,
Why
"Gray
do you
Hair Divorce."
think it is? Why do you think it is?
Yep.
You know why, and I know why, but the public doesn't know why yet, and they need to.
Uh, thank you for joining us today as we discuss this topic. The mental health community has yet to formally classify midlife crisis as a psychological impairment with real-world consequences, similar to what you've heard today. Research suggests that MLC can involve symptoms similar to depression, identity crisis, and even dissociative states. Like other conditions that impair judgment, such as manic episodes and bipolar disorder or temporary psychosis, MLC often leads individuals to make reckless decisions similar to that they later end up regretting. If a person is in a psychiatric crisis, if a person in a psychiatric crisis cannot legally sign contracts or make major life decisions without oversight, why should an individual in the throes of a midlife crisis be allowed to dismantle a marriage, sell a home, or drain shared finances without safeguards? We believe legal protections must be implemented. To prevent MLC driven destruction of families, legal reforms should be considered, such as waiting periods for major decisions. Just as there are waiting periods for gun purchases and other high risk actions, a mandatory reflection period should be instituted before finalizing divorce or selling shared property during an MLC. There could be legal oversight for spousal protection. If one spouse claims the other is in a midlife crisis, courts should require mediation and mental health assessments before irreversible legal actions can be taken. It's our efforts through this podcast that more awareness can be brought to this situation so that going forward, from unilaterally destroying a shared life due to a temporary psychological breakdown. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to having you join us on our future shows. Thanks so much. Have a super day, you guys. Bye.